Okay, so, the whisper moving through the West Coast right now is not a diss record, it is not a subliminal, and it is not one of those studio arguments that dies by Friday afternoon. The chatter making rounds is that Drake, yes that Drake, has allegedly been quietly funding a pressure campaign designed to walk YG straight into a homicide charge, and the man who said it out loud on camera is not a burner account, not a blog, not a bot farm sitting in somebody's basement. It is Glasses Malone, a grown Compton veteran with nothing to gain from making that up. And before you roll your eyes and scroll, understand what I just told you, because Glasses Malone did not say Drake was subtweeting. He said Drake was spending. He used the word campaigns. Plural. Organized. Funded. And roughly 48 hours later, YG himself did not laugh it off, did not post a laughing emoji, did not send his lawyer out with a statement. YG went to his own Instagram story and typed the words "Red Alert." That is where we are today, and that is why this is not a normal rumor cycle. Let me be precise with you from the very first breath, because this story has already been twisted 3 different ways by pages that only read the headline. Nobody has charged YG with anything. No arrest has been made in the killing of Drakeo the Ruler. The California Highway Patrol told NBC Los Angeles directly that YG is not a suspect and not a person of interest. And the allegation about Drake financing anything is exactly that, an allegation, made by one man on a live stream, with 0 documents attached to it. I am not here to hand you a conviction. I am here to hand you the receipts, in order, with dates, and let you watch how a 5-year-old tragedy got dragged back into the daylight at the single, most convenient moment imaginable. Because once you see the timeline the way I am about to lay it out, you are going to have the same reaction I did, which was to sit back in my chair and say out loud, somebody is playing chess with a dead man's name. Stay with me, because the piece nobody has connected yet is sitting in a deposition transcript from March of last year, and it explains why this particular week exploded instead of fizzling like the last 4 times. Hit that subscribe button and turn the bell on so you catch part 2 when the next document drops, because I promise you this story is not finished, and then let me walk you through it. So here's the ground floor for anybody who has been living outside of this. Drakeo the Ruler, legal name Daryl Caldwell Jr., was one of the most inventive voices Los Angeles has produced in the last 15 years. Not a copy of anybody. His flow was slippery, sarcastic, coded, almost like he was talking to you in a language he invented that afternoon. Nervous music, he called it. And on December 18, 2021, backstage at the Once Upon a Time in LA Festival and Exposition Park, Drakeo the Ruler was stabbed during a brawl and died the next day. He was 28 years old. A festival that was supposed to be a celebration of the city, with Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube and 50 Cent on the bill, turned into the night that Los Angeles hip-hop still has not processed. So what does a man do after 4.5 years of that? In June of 2026, he answered it the only way rappers know how to answer anything. He put it on wax. On Friday, June 19th, YG released his album The Gentleman's Club, and on it he debuted a record called We Know the Truth, along with a video, and he stopped dancing around the accusation entirely. His words, "They say I murdered this, they say I murdered that." Well, if that was true, you would be a rat, and I would be in the cell sleeping on a rack. But too bad that ain't a fact. And then, 34 days later, the front door got knocked on. July 23, 2026. Burbank, California. Moss Street near Magnolia Boulevard, right off the 5 freeway. The California Highway Patrol, working alongside the Burbank Police Department's SWAT team, executed a search warrant on a property connected to YG. And during that search, YG was detained. Not arrested. Detained. Handcuffed on a sidewalk in the middle of the day while officers went through a building, in a case tied to the death of Drakeo the Ruler. The CHP confirmed the warrant was served in connection with the murder investigation of Daryl Caldwell. They confirmed YG was present when officers arrived. They confirmed he was released once the search was completed. And then, crucially, when asked directly whether YG was a suspect or a person of interest, a CHP spokesperson told NBC Los Angeles that he was not, and a spokesperson separately said the agency could not comment further because this remains an ongoing and open investigation. Now pause, because I need you to hold 2 facts in your hands at the same time without dropping either one. And this is exactly where most of the internet failed this week. Fact 2. Law enforcement, on the record, said he is not a suspect and not a person of interest, and released him without an arrest the same day. Both of those things are true. And the fact that they are both true at the same time is precisely what turned this into a wildfire, because it left a vacuum, and the internet does not tolerate vacuums. When something looks enormous but produces nothing, human beings do not conclude nothing happened. Human beings conclude somebody is hiding something. That is not logic. That is just how we are wired. And whoever benefits from that wiring got a very good day on July 23rd. And I need you to notice the calendar, because the calendar is doing something almost theatrical here. That detainment did not land on a random Tuesday in a dead news week. It landed the same day YG was scheduled to appear at one of the biggest West Coast cultural moments of the summer. He still showed up. TMZ reported that after the detainment, YG took the stage anyway, and during the Versus battle, he told the crowd he almost did not make it to that stage. Almost did not make it. Think about how much weight is packed into that one throwaway line. That is a man standing in front of thousands of people, hours after being detained in a homicide investigation, choosing to acknowledge it in real time instead of pretending it never happened. Then July 24th arrived, and July 24th is the day this went from a legal story to a war story. But at the press conference tied to that same run, something very different happened, and this is where the Drake thread enters the room for the first time. Hot New Hip Hop reported that a reporter asked YG about the Drake situation, and YG did not give a media-trained non-answer. He snapped, "Damn, bro. You got all the Drake questions. You can save that for the Drake press conference. Y'all trying to go viral with y'all questions? Huh? I'm about to walk out of here." That same press run gave us the quote that honestly rearranged how I feel about this entire story, because it moved it out of gossip and into something human. In a separate report, YG addressed the Drakeo rumor cloud far more directly. "Just too much talk on the internet. Too many people hitting me. Is you alright? Kids, dad, are you going to jail? All that type of thing. I'm just being silent and living by the law and rules. Coming from the streets, I must speak on this, but I must still stand on the law and the rules of this. I think it's time for me to speak my piece. Sit with the part that most people skipped, because everybody quoted the first half and ignored the sentence that actually matters. Kids, dad, are you going to jail? Those are not blog words. Those are the words of a man whose children are asking him questions he should never have to answer at a kitchen table. Whatever you believe about YG, whatever you think happened in that backstage area in 2021, that specific detail changes the texture of this whole situation. Because it means the rumor stopped being a rumor a long time ago. It became a thing his kids hear at school. It became a thing his family checks on him about. And that is a category of damage no retraction has ever fixed for anybody, ever. So now we have the picture. June 19th. He answers the rumor in music. July 23rd, a SWAT-assisted warrant and a detainment. Same day, he performs anyway and tells a crowd he almost did not make it. July 24th, he is publicly honored while being pelted with Drake questions and admitting the noise is reaching his children. That is a 9-day window from silence to siege. And then July 31st happened, and July 31st is why you are watching this video. Glasses Malone went live. And Glasses Malone is not a random commentator, which matters enormously to how this landed. He is a Watts native, a veteran of the West Coast system, a man who has spent years explaining the mechanics of that world on camera with a level of specificity most artists avoid. When Glasses Malone talks about how things actually operate out there, people in that ecosystem tend to listen because he is not guessing from the outside. According to Hot New Hip Hop, reporting on a clip that got reposted and moved across the internet on July 31st, Glasses Malone alleged that Drake is spending money to interfere with YG's life. And then he escalated with a line that did not stay a rumor for even an hour. He's financing Drakeo campaigns to try to mess with this boy's life and get him arrested because he's mad about a battle. Read that again, and put your finger on the single most dangerous word in it. It is not financing. It is not arrested. It is campaigns. Because campaigns is not a word you use for gossip. Campaigns implies a budget. Campaigns implies coordination. Campaigns implies repetition over time toward a defined objective. Post is a moment. Rumor is an accident. A campaign is a plan. Glasses Malone did not describe a man talking trash. He described infrastructure. And then he described the motive in the pettiest possible terms, which is exactly why it detonated. Because he's mad about a battle. He is not alleging a blood feud, or a business war, or a territorial dispute. He is alleging that a homicide investigation is being weaponized as revenge for a rap competition. If that were true, it would be one of the ugliest things anybody has ever alleged in this genre. And if it is not true, then it is one of the most reckless sentences ever said into a phone camera. There is no middle version of that sentence. It is either an atomic bomb or it is a suicide note. And Glasses Malone said it anyway. But he did not stop there, and honestly the second half of what he said is the part that should have been the headline, because it is the part with a thread inside it. He start playing me like that. I swear to God, I'll make his life horrible. That's rented power. You pay for it. Real power is when people will do it for you just for the measure. You don't want me to start announcing to the world exactly what type of stuff you're doing. Now, rented power. 2 words. And I would argue those two words are the most important thing anybody has said about the modern music business in the last 2 years, and I say that completely seriously. Because here is what rented power actually means when you strip the anger off it. Glass's Malone is describing a distinction between influence that is earned and influence that is purchased. Real power, in his framing, is when people move for you out of loyalty, out of respect, out of genuine allegiance, without an invoice attached. Rented power is when the same outcome gets produced, but every participant got paid, and the second the money stops, the movement stops. And whether or not you believe a single word of the accusation against Drake, that concept is real, and everybody in this industry knows it is real. Now, here is where the story stopped being one man's livestream rant and became a genuine cultural event. Because YG saw it. Hot New Hip Hop reported that on July 31st, YG reposted the clip to his own Instagram story. And here's what he wrote on it. Say it ain't so. Followed by thinking emojis. Then, in a follow-up story, 5 words that changed the entire conversation. Red alert. B-team, tap in. Okay, let us do the forensic work on that, because there are 3 distinct decisions inside that post, and every single one of them tells you something. Decision 1. He amplified instead of denying. This is the big one. If somebody accuses your rival of secretly financing a plot to have you arrested for murder, and you know for a fact that is nonsense, the move is obvious. You ignore it, or you say that is not true. Do not put that on my name. YG did neither. He took the clip that was sitting on somebody else's page with a fraction of his reach and personally handed it to his own audience. He did not extinguish the fire. He carried it into a bigger room. Decision 3, and this is the one that made my head snap up. Red alert. B-team, tap in. That is not a public statement. That is not addressed to fans, to media, or to the general internet. Red alert is emergency language. B-team, tap in is a summons. He is calling specific people. He is telling a defined group to become active. That post was written for an audience of maybe a few dozen people, and it just happened to be published to millions. And that is exactly why it hit so hard. Because we were not reading a press release. We were reading somebody's internal communication by accident. A polished denial gets skimmed and forgotten in 4 seconds. A coded alarm turns 3 million people into amateur detectives instantly. So let us talk about why anybody found the Drake allegation plausible in the first place. Because a claim this wild does not travel unless the ground was already prepared for it. Hot New Hip Hop noted that tension between Drake and YG's orbit was not exactly a secret. YG is deeply tied to Mustard. Mustard produced Not Like Us. And Not Like Us is not just a song. It is the record that functionally reorganized the power structure of mainstream hip-hop, swept the Grammys, and turned a rap battle into a permanent cultural verdict against Drake in a way no diss record ever has before in this genre's history. So when you place YG on the West Coast side of that divide, tied to the producer of the record that did the most damage, and then a homicide search warrant lands on his property, and then somebody alleges the other side of that battle is funding the pressure, the audience does not need evidence. The audience already has a story that makes sense to them emotionally. An emotional sense travels roughly 1,000 times faster than factual sense. Do you see how this works? Nobody needed a document. The narrative assembled itself out of pieces that were already lying on the ground. And I want to be extremely clear here, because this is the exact point where channels lose the plot and start manufacturing evidence. Drake has not been shown to have funded anything. There is no filing, no receipt, no witness, no leaked message, no second source. Hot New Hip Hop themselves explicitly noted that the speculation had not been validated at the time of publication. One man said it on a live stream. Another man reposted it with thinking emojis. That is the entire evidentiary foundation of the Drake portion of this story. But that is not the whole story. Because while everybody was arguing about Drake, an actual sworn document was sitting in a courthouse, and almost nobody read it. And this is the part one have been building toward, because this is the piece that explains everything about the timing. On July 24th, the Los Angeles Times published an examination of deposition excerpts obtained from an ongoing civil case. Not a criminal case. A civil wrongful death lawsuit filed in February 2022 by Drakeo the Ruler's son and other relatives against Live Nation, C3 Presents, Bobby D Presents, and several security contractors. The core claim of that lawsuit is that the companies responsible for staging and securing the festival failed to protect Drakeo from an attack they should have seen coming. And I need you to hold on to one detail that almost every reaction video this week left out entirely. YG is not a defendant in that lawsuit. He is not being sued. The lawsuit is against the promoters and the security companies. But a witness in that lawsuit said his name under oath. Ulrich Cooper III was part of Drakeo the Ruler's security detail that night. On March 19, 2025, Cooper sat for a deposition, and excerpts from that deposition surfaced in a court filing by attorneys representing Drakeo's family. And what Cooper described under oath is genuinely difficult to read. Cooper testified that Drakeo's group was confronted backstage by at least 20 to 25 people. When an attorney for Drakeo's family asked him whether he recognized anyone in that opposing group, Cooper named one person. YG. He was directly involved in the fight, the attorney asked. Yeah, Cooper answered. Front and center. Cooper testified that the attackers split into groups and surrounded Drakeo's party near the artist entrance. He said some of them wore red clothing, some wore ski masks, some wore hoodies. And then he made an accusation against the venue itself that I think has been criminally under-discussed this week. Cooper testified that festival security did not intervene, and that instead of opening an escape route, they closed 2 gates. They actually closed the gates and trapped us into where we couldn't leave, Cooper testified. Stop right there for 1 second. Because if that testimony holds up, then a group of human beings were sealed inside an enclosed area, while 25 people closed in on them. And the professionals paid to prevent exactly that outcome made it geometrically impossible to escape. That is the actual heart of the lawsuit, and it is the piece of this story that gets the least attention, because it does not have a famous name attached to it. Cooper continued. He said he struck one of the approaching men and briefly lost his footing. He said he then found himself fighting the man he identified and a person he described as that man's bodyguard, with Drakeo positioned a foot or 2 behind him and to his right. And then YG produced a knife from his left hand, Cooper testified, describing the blade as appearing to emerge from the sleeve. And when I saw that, I just backed up. And then, according to Cooper's account, the attackers moved toward Drakeo and swarmed over him, with police arriving almost simultaneously. Now here is the enormous asterisk, and the Los Angeles Times reported it plainly, and I am going to repeat it because it is the difference between journalism and defamation. Cooper acknowledged in that same deposition that the man he identified as YG was wearing a black balaclava that exposed only the area around his eyes. A ski mask, covering everything but the eyes. Asked how he could make an identification under those conditions, Cooper said he had met YG many times, and that he recognized the eyes, the body type, the height, the walk, and the demeanor. He described the man as wearing a black bomber-style jacket, black pants with red stripes, and shiny black shoes, and estimated his height at around 6'1" or 6'2". So what you have, in sworn testimony, is a masked identification based on familiarity, gait, and eyes, made during a chaotic brawl involving 25 people, recalled in a deposition more than 3 years after the night in question. Now I want you to think about how a defense attorney handles that, because this matters. Masked identification is one of the most heavily contested categories of eyewitness evidence that exists in American courtrooms. Memory degrades. Adrenaline distorts. Familiarity creates confidence that does not always correlate with accuracy. But here is the thing that the internet does not care about at all. In a courtroom, the balaclava is a massive problem for that testimony. On the internet, the balaclava is irrelevant because the headline is already written. Security guard testifies YG had a knife. That is the sentence that traveled. The qualifier never travels with it. And Cooper testified that this history led him to warn Drakeo before the festival that they needed more security, because he believed there was a substantial chance the 2 artists or their entourages would cross paths. Read that last part again, because it is the saddest sentence in this entire story. A member of the security team saw it coming. He said so, under oath. And it happened anyway. Now, let us put the calendar back together, because the sequence is the entire ballgame. And this is the connection almost nobody has made out loud. Cooper's deposition was taken on March 19, 2025. Those excerpts surfaced publicly in a court filing in June 2026. YG released We Know the Truth on June 19, 2026. The Burbank search warrant and detainment happened on July 23, 2026. The Los Angeles Times published the deposition details on July 24, 2026. The Glasses Malone clip and YG's Red Alert post landed on July 31, 2026. Do you see it now? The deposition excerpts hit the public record first. Then a warrant gets executed. Then the testimony details get published the following day. Then, a week later, an allegation appears claiming that a third party is financing exactly this kind of pressure. Now, there is an entirely innocent explanation for that sequence, and I want to give it to you honestly. Civil discovery and criminal investigation frequently move on parallel tracks that intersect naturally. New testimony surfacing in a civil case can absolutely generate new investigative leads for law enforcement. A warrant following the surfacing of new sworn testimony is not suspicious. It is arguably the system functioning exactly as designed. But that is not how a timeline reads to an audience that already distrusts institutions. To that audience, this is a sequence of dominoes, and somebody's hand is visible at the front of the line. And this is the exact scene where the narrative war lives. Because the same set of facts supports two completely opposite stories, and which one you believe depends entirely on what you already believed before you clicked on this video. Story 1. A tragedy is being investigated. New sworn testimony surfaced. Investigators followed it. A man was detained and released because the evidence is not there. The system is grinding forward slowly, the way it does, and a grieving family is trying to get answers about why their son was trapped behind closed gates. Story 2. A 5-year-old case with no arrests suddenly reactivates within weeks of a man publicly defending himself in song, on the same day as a major cultural appearance, with a SWAT assist, producing nothing, and a week later a credible veteran says money is behind it. Both of those stories fit every known fact. That is what makes this so combustible. Now let me show you how 4 different newsrooms took those same facts and built 4 different buildings out of them, because this is the part that reveals how narrative actually gets manufactured in real time. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Hot New Hip Hop told it as collision. Their coverage repeatedly stacked the competing narratives against each other, YG's denials, the Drake tension, the Glasses Malone allegation, and YG's own Instagram activity, while explicitly and repeatedly reminding readers that the financing claim was unsubstantiated. Their frame was not what happened. It was why the culture is losing its mind over this. Complex told it as legacy. Their piece about the game honoring YG mentioned the detainment and the release and the denials, but the center of gravity was celebration, respect, and a man showing up despite the cloud. Read Complex, and this is a story about resilience. XXL told it as self-defense. Their coverage anchored on We Know the Truth, on YG answering the rumor in his own voice, on his own record, on his own terms. Read XXL, and YG is a man who was already fighting this narrative before the headlines caught up. For newsrooms, one set of facts. For completely different emotional experiences. Nobody lied. Everybody chose. And the choosing is the story. Now let us talk about what I actually think is happening here, because I have sat with this for days and I do not believe the popular version. The popular version is a movie. In the popular version, a superstar sits in a dark room making phone calls, moving money, orchestrating a takedown with the precision of a Bond villain. That version is satisfying. It is clean. It has a face you can hate. I do not think that is what this is. And honestly, I think the truth is significantly more disturbing. Here is my read. I do not think this required a mastermind at all. I think the modern attention economy has become so efficient at manufacturing consequences that you no longer need anybody to orchestrate anything. The machine runs on its own, and it runs on incentives that align without anyone ever having a conversation. Think about who benefits from this story existing, and notice how many of them never had to coordinate with each other. Commentary channels benefit. A story like this one is guaranteed engagement, and there are thousands of channels that will cover it within hours of any development, without being asked, without being paid, purely because the numbers are there. Repost pages benefit, because outrage is the highest performing content category that has ever existed. And this is why Glasses Malone's phrase keeps rattling around in my skull. Rented power. Because he described purchased influence, and he might be completely right that it exists. But the more terrifying possibility is the one nobody wants to say out loud. You do not have to rent it anymore. Half of it now works for free. And here is why that matters legally, not just culturally. And this is the part one have not heard anybody articulate clearly this week. There has been no arrest in this case for 4.5 years. But the public verdict landed in 2021, within hours, before a single piece of evidence was examined by anybody. So the courtroom and the culture are now running 2 completely separate trials, with 2 completely different standards of proof, and only one of them requires evidence. That gap, between what can be proven and what has already been decided, is the space where this entire war is being fought. And nobody has figured out how to win a case in that space, because there is no judge, there is no jury, and there is no appeal. So my honest position, and you are welcome to disagree with me loudly in the comments, is this. The question is not whether Drake made a phone call. The question is whether anybody needed him to. Because the atmosphere required to produce this exact outcome already existed, fully formed, with or without him. And if that is true, then the most disturbing part of this entire story is that it could happen to anybody, at any time, and there would be nobody to sue, because the perpetrator is a distributed system rather than a person. Now, let us talk about what happens next, because there are 4 realistic paths, and I want to walk you through each one. Path 1. Drake stays completely silent. This is the most likely outcome, and I think it is also the most damaging for him. which is the cruel irony of his position. Because silence used to be strength. In 2026, silence is a canvas, and the audience paints on it. Every day he does not respond. The theory gains a little more structural integrity in the public mind, not because silence is evidence, but because the human brain treats unanswered accusations as partially confirmed. Meanwhile, YG gets to occupy the far more sympathetic role of the man under pressure who is speaking anyway. Path 3. And this is the wild card I am genuinely watching for. More West Coast voices pick sides publicly. If one more credible figure, an artist, a manager, a podcaster, an executive, adds even one specific detail to the Glasses Malone allegation, this stops being a rumor week and becomes a regional realignment. And the moment that happens, it turns into a loyalty audit. Who defends YG? Who stays quiet? Who suddenly gets very careful about names? Silence becomes a position. Neutrality becomes a statement. That is when you find out what the actual power map of the West Coast looks like in 2026, and I do not think everybody is going to like what that map reveals. Path 4. The civil case keeps producing documents. And this is the one everybody is sleeping on, so let me put it on your radar right now. All parties are due back in court for the first of 2 hearings beginning August 13th, covering motions to dismiss brought by Bobby D. Presence and Live Nation. That is a real date on a real calendar. And civil discovery is a machine that does not care about anybody's PR strategy. It generates depositions. Depositions generate excerpts. Excerpts generate headlines. Cooper's testimony surfaced through exactly that pipeline, and there is no reason to believe he is the only person who has been deposed in a case that has been running since February 2022, which means the next detonation in this story is far more likely to come out of a filing cabinet than out of a live stream. Write that down, because let us be honest about who is actually paying for all of this. Not Drake. Whatever happens, he will sell out arenas next year, and this will be a paragraph in a long career. Not the artist at the center of it, ultimately. He will keep making records, and a portion of his audience will love him harder for having survived the pressure. The people paying are the Caldwell family. Because every single cycle of this, every repost, every reaction video, every live stream allegation, drags Drakeo the Ruler's death back into public entertainment and converts it into content. His son is growing up in a world where his father's killing is a recurring topic in comment sections and a reliable driver of ad revenue for strangers. That family has been in litigation since February 2022, trying to establish why a festival closed the gates instead of opening them. And the internet has spent that entire period arguing about which famous person to blame, while barely mentioning the venue, the promoters, or the security contractors who are the actual defendants in the actual lawsuit. Read that sentence again, because it is the most damning thing in this entire video. The people being sued are almost never the people being discussed. And that is not an accident. That is the design. Because Live Nation is not a satisfying villain. A security contractor is not a face you can hate. There is no thumbnail in a promoter's negligence. So the conversation drifts, inevitably, toward the names that generate clicks, and the actual legal question, whether an organization failed to protect a human being it had a duty to protect, gets buried under a celebrity feud that may have nothing to do with it. That is how attention works now. It flows toward personalities and away from institutions, every single time, and institutions have noticed. So let me bring this all the way back to where we started, because I told you at the top that the timeline was the story, and now you can see the whole shape of it. Remember that opening claim, the one that sounded impossible. Drake allegedly financing campaigns to get YG arrested. Here is what we can actually verify about it after everything we have walked through. Glasses Malone said it on a live stream. The clip spread on July 31st. YG reposted it with "say it ain't so" and thinking emojis, then followed it with "red alert, B-team, tap in." And that is the entire evidentiary record. 1 veteran's word, 1 rival's amplification, 0 documents. Everything beyond that is inference. Remember the testimony. Ulrich Cooper III testified under oath on March 19, 2025, that he saw YG produce a knife and slash toward him during the brawl, and that he was front and center, and that 2 other men nearby appeared to be armed. Remember the red alert. And ask yourself the question that has been sitting underneath this entire video, the one I genuinely cannot answer for you. Why did YG amplify it instead of killing it? Because there are only 3 explanations. Either he believes it and wanted his people to know, or he does not believe it and saw an opportunity to redirect the pressure toward someone else, or he does not know what he believes anymore, and after 4.5 years of carrying a rumor he cannot outrun, he saw somebody finally suggest an explanation for why it will not die, and something in him grabbed onto it. I think it is the third one. I think that post was not strategy. I think it was exhaustion. Because you do not type red alert when you are executing a plan. You type red alert when you feel surrounded. But I could be completely wrong, and that is genuinely why I want to hear from you, because the comment section on this one is going to be more interesting than the video. So tell me 3 things. First, do you think Glasses Malone said too much or not enough? And does his silence since that clip mean he is holding receipts or backing away from a line he should not have crossed? Second, does YG reposting that clip make him look like a man who knows something, or a man reaching for an explanation? And third, the one I really want your answer on. If a coordinated narrative campaign against an artist actually existed, would there even be a way to prove it? Or has the internet permanently made that kind of thing untraceable? Drop it below, and be specific, because I read these and the sharpest takes end up in the follow-up. And here is what you need to be watching, so you are ahead of everybody else instead of reacting a week late. Watch August 13th. That is the first of 2 scheduled hearings on the motions to dismiss filed by Bobby D. Presence and Live Nation. If those motions fail, the case proceeds, and Discovery keeps producing sworn testimony. And sworn testimony is what generated this entire cycle in the first place. And watch whether anybody, anywhere, ever produces a single document connecting Drake to any of this. Because until that happens, the honest position is the one I have held for this entire video. It is an allegation. It isn't proven. And it is spreading anyway. That last part is the real story. Not who did it, but how little proof it now takes to make millions of people certain of something. A man is dead. Drakeo the Ruler was 28. He was one of the most original voices this city ever produced, and 4.5 years later nobody has been arrested for killing him. Another man has been living under a public accusation with no charge, no trial, and no way to clear his name. A third man has been accused of orchestrating the whole thing with nothing but a live stream as evidence. And a family is sitting in a courtroom in August trying to find out why the gates were closed. Everybody in this story loses except the machine that keeps replaying it. If this breakdown gave you something the reaction videos did not, subscribe and turn on notifications, because when those August 13th filings hit, I am going to read the actual documents and bring you what is in them, not what a screenshot says is in them. And if you want to understand how we got to a place where a rap battle can allegedly bleed into a homicide investigation, watch the video on your screen right now, because that one lays out the entire West Coast power structure that made this week possible. It will change how you read every headline that comes out of this case. I am telling you now, this one is not over. Not even close.